first time I saw humans in combat, I thought they were insane. My name is Zeth Carr, and I served as a tactical analyst for the Galactic Defense Coalition. For 300 cycles, I had studied warfare across 17 different species, cataloging their strengths, weaknesses, and combat doctrines. I thought I understood violence. I thought I understood courage. I was wrong on both counts. The humans have been part of our alliance for barely 2 standard years when a Vorthack invaded the Kepler 442 system. The Vorthack were everything nightmares were made of: 8-foot-tall insectoid predators with exoskeletons that could deflect plasma bolts and mandibles that could crush titanium. They had consumed 14 star systems in the past decade, leaving nothing but empty worlds in their wake. When the call came for reinforcements to defend Kepler 442b, a mining colony with 2 million souls, every species in the coalition responded. The Altarians sent their crystal ships with their devastating energy cannons. The Morgothi brought their biomechanical destroyers. The Veltar contributed their phase technology vessels that could strike from folded space. And the humans? They sent 3 old cargo ships hastily converted into troop transports. I was assigned to the Coalition flagship, monitoring the human contribution to our defense. Their ships were primitive by our standards: chemical rockets and kinetic weapons, technology we had abandoned centuries ago. Their armor looked like metal plates bolted together. Their weapons fired solid projectiles instead of energy beams. Captain Sarah Chun commanded the human forces. She was small by galactic standards, barely reaching the shoulder of most Coalition officers, with graying hair and scars across her weathered face. When she spoke at the strategic briefing, her voice was calm and measured. "My people know this will be difficult," she said, looking around at the assembled alien commanders. "We understand we're the newest members of this alliance. We understand our technology isn't as advanced. But we also understand something else." She paused, meeting each commander's gaze in turn. "We understand that sometimes being human is enough." The other commanders exchanged glances. I could see the uncertainty in their expressions. What could these primitive newcomers contribute to a battle that would determine the fate of 2 million lives? 3 days later, I found out. The Vorthack fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts. 500 ships, each one a masterwork of destruction. Their flagship alone was larger than our entire defensive fleet combined. As they approached, we could see the scarred hulls of previous victims, fragments of destroyed ships welded to their vessels like trophies. Our battle formation was textbook perfect. The Altarian crystal ships formed the center line, their energy cannons ready to punch through Vorthack armor. The Morgothi biodestroyers flanked them, their living hulls pulsing with contained violence. The Veltar phase ships waited in folded space, ready to emerge behind enemy lines. And the humans? They positioned themselves at the very front of our formation. "Human vessels, you are dangerously exposed," Admiral Korthval transmitted. "Withdraw to support positions immediately." Captain Chin's response was immediate. "Negative, Admiral. We're exactly where we need to be." The first wave of Vorthack fighters screamed toward us like angry hornets. Each fighter was the size of a Coalition corvette, armed with acid spitters and razor drones. They moved in perfect formation, a wall of death approaching at relativistic speeds. Our energy weapons opened fire first. Brilliant beams of coherent light lanced across space, and several Vorthack fighters exploded in beautiful flowers of flame. But more kept coming. Always more. Then, the humans opened fire. The sound was unlike anything I had ever experienced in space combat. Through our ship's audio pickups, we could hear it, the deep, rhythmic thundering of chemical explosives and kinetic accelerators. The humans weren't firing energy beams. They were firing metal. Lots of metal. Very fast metal. Their weapons were crude, but devastating. Railguns that hurled tungsten rods at significant fractions of light speed. Chemical cannons that fired explosive shells the size of small asteroids. Missiles that moved like living things, weaving between enemy fire to deliver their payloads. But it wasn't their weapons that caught my attention. It was how they used them. Every other species in the coalition fought with calculated precision. We analyzed threat patterns, optimized firing solutions, and maintained safe distances. We fought like scientists conducting experiments. The humans fought like they were protecting their children. Captain Chen's ship, the Indomitable, charged directly into the center of the Vorthack formation. Her crew didn't wait for optimal firing solutions. They fired everything, constantly, at anything that moved. When their primary weapons overheated, they switched to backup systems. When those failed, they launched their escape pods as improvised missiles. "What are they doing?" Admiral Korthval demanded. "This is suicide." But it wasn't suicide. It was something else entirely. The Vorthack had fought dozens of species. They knew how to counter our energy weapons, how to adapt to our tactics, how to turn our own strategies against us. But they had never fought anyone like the humans. Human tactics made no sense. They ignored optimal engagement ranges. They fired at targets they couldn't possibly hit. They rammed damaged ships into enemy formations instead of retreating for repairs. By every rule of warfare I had learned, they should have been annihilated in minutes. Instead, they were winning. The Vorthack formation began to waver. These perfect predators, who had conquered system after system through calculated aggression, found themselves facing something they didn't understand. Chaos. Pure, beautiful chaos wielded by beings who seemed to have made friends with death itself. I watched Captain Chen's ship take a direct hit from a Vorthack capital ship. The blast should have vaporized her vessel. Instead, the Indomitable spun like a wounded bird, atmospheric gases venting from a dozen hull breaches, and somehow kept firing. "Indomitable, your ship is critically damaged," Admiral Korthval transmitted. "Withdraw immediately for emergency repairs." Chen's response came through static and interference. "Negative, Admiral. We're not done here." Through my sensors, I could see into the human ship's bridge. Half the crew was injured. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. The air was thick with smoke. And Captain Chen stood in the center of it all, blood running from a cut on her forehead, calling out orders in that same calm voice she had used in the briefing. "Rodriguez, give me more power to the forward guns. Kim, I need those missile tubes reloaded. Chen actual to all human vessels. It's time to show these bugs what happens when you threaten our neighbors." That was when I began to understand. The humans weren't fighting for themselves. They weren't fighting for territory or resources or strategic advantage. They were fighting because someone had threatened people they had sworn to protect. And that changed everything. The second wave of Vorthack ships arrived expecting to find a weakened coalition fleet. Instead, they found something unprecedented in their conquest of the galaxy. They found humans who had decided that retreat was not an option. Lieutenant Marcus Webb commanded the human ship Defiant. His vessel had lost both main engines and was running on maneuvering thrusters alone. Any rational commander would have evacuated to a safer ship. Instead, Webb did something that defied all military logic. He pointed his crippled ship directly at the largest Vorthack dreadnought and pushed his remaining engines to maximum. "Defiant, what are your intentions?" Admiral Korthval demanded. Webb's response was calm, almost conversational. "Admiral, my ship can't run and can't fight effectively, but she can still fly. And sometimes that's enough." The Defiant accelerated toward the enemy dreadnought like a spear thrown by an angry god. The Vorthack vessel tried to destroy the approaching ship, but its weapons couldn't track something moving so erratically. Webb's crew had shut down everything except life support and engines, making his ship nearly invisible to enemy sensors. The collision was visible from 3 star systems away. The explosion tore through the Vorthack dreadnought like lightning through storm clouds. Secondary detonations ripped along its hull as ammunition stores ignited. The massive ship, pride of the enemy fleet, broke apart in a cascade of fire and metal. And in that moment, something changed in the Vorthack formation. For the first time in their species' history, they hesitated. These perfect predators had encountered something they had no reference for. Beings who would destroy themselves to protect others. Creatures who fought harder when wounded, not weaker. A species that seemed to have declared war on the very concept of surrender. Sergeant Elena Vasquez led the human Marines when the Vorthack attempted to board our ships. While coalition security forces fell back to defensive positions, the human Marines did something different. They advanced. I watched through security feeds as Vasquez and her squad moved through the corridors of the damaged Altarian crystal ship Luminous Dawn. The Vorthack boarders were 8 feet tall and armored like walking tanks. The humans were small, soft, and carried weapons that should have been ineffective against enemy armor. But the humans had something the Vorthack didn't understand. They had anger. "Contact left," Vasquez called out, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Jensen, give me covering fire on that bug. Martinez, flank right. Shin, you're with me." The first Vorthack warrior rounded the corner and immediately faced concentrated fire from 3 human weapons. Their bullets sparked off its armor, doing minimal damage. The creature raised its acid spitter to return fire. That was when Vasquez did something that redefined courage for every species watching. She charged. A 120-pound human female ran directly at an 8-foot-tall armored killing machine. The Vorthack warrior was so surprised that it hesitated for a crucial second. Vasquez used that second to leap onto its back, drive her combat knife between armor plates, and pump her sidearm's entire magazine into the creature's nervous system at point-blank range. The warrior fell. Vasquez rolled, came up firing, and immediately engaged the next target. "Ma'am," one of her Marines called out, "there are too many of them." Vasquez's response became legendary among human military forces. "Then we'll have to kill them all twice." The battle for the Luminous Dawn lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 37 humans had defeated over 200 Vorthack boarders. They lost 22 of their own people, but they saved the ship and its crew of 800 Altarians. The Vorthack retreat began 12 hours later. These perfect predators, who had never known defeat, began withdrawing from the Kepler 442 system. Not because they lacked the strength to continue fighting, but because they had encountered something that terrified them more than death itself. They had met humans. Admiral Korthval called me to the bridge as the enemy fleet departed. His expression was thoughtful, almost puzzled. "Analyst Zethkar, explain what happened here. By all tactical projections, we should have lost this engagement. Our forces were outnumbered 3-1. The enemy possessed superior technology and combat experience. How did we achieve victory?" I looked at the tactical displays, trying to find the answer in numbers and statistics. But the answer wasn't in the data. It was in the stories. "Sir, the humans introduced a variable we didn't account for." Which was? I thought about Captain Shun standing on our burning bridge, about Lieutenant Webb pointing his crippled ship at certain death, about Sergeant Vasquez charging an armored monster with nothing but courage and a knife. "They introduced themselves, sir. They fought like humans." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "File a full report, analyst, and make sure it reaches every world in the coalition. Our allies need to know what kind of species has joined our cause." As I began writing my report, I realized that everything had changed. The galaxy had spent eons believing that superior technology and calculated strategies determined the outcome of conflicts. We had forgotten something fundamental about war. Sometimes, heart matters more than weapons. Sometimes, the will to protect others overcomes any tactical disadvantage. Sometimes, being human is not just enough. Sometimes, it's everything. 3 months after Kepler 442, everything changed. My report had circulated through every coalition world, translated into 47 languages, and distributed to military academies across known space. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the humans. What made them fight so differently? How could such a young species produce warriors who seemed immune to fear? The answers came during the siege of Proxima Station. Proxima Station orbited a gas giant in the Centauri system, serving as a critical supply hub for coalition forces. It housed 12,000 beings from 8 different species, including civilians who worked in the manufacturing centers that produced components for our fleet. When the hegemony attacked, they brought a force that dwarfed anything we had faced before. The hegemony was an alliance of 3 species united by a simple belief: the galaxy belonged to the strong. They had watched the coalition grow for decades, waiting for the right moment to claim our territories for themselves. The presence of humans in our ranks had apparently convinced them that we were growing too powerful. Their attack fleet consisted of 800 ships led by Overlord Vextar, a draconian general whose tactical genius was matched only by his cruelty. The draconians stood 9 feet tall, with scales that could deflect energy weapons and natural armor that made them nearly invulnerable in personal combat. Their allies, the silicon-based crystallants and the energy-being ethereals, added their own terrifying capabilities to the force. Proxima Station's defenses consisted of 42 coalition ships and a complement of defensive platforms. We were outnumbered nearly 20 to 1. Captain Sarah Chun commanded the human contingent once again, but this time she brought more than just converted cargo ships. In the 3 months since Kepler 442, the human government had apparently been busy. Their new vessels still looked crude by coalition standards, but they bristled with weapons that defied conventional understanding. Admiral, Chen reported to Coalition Commander Thexel, human reinforcements are in position and ready to engage. Commander Thexel, a Veltar whose species had perfected long-range combat, studied the tactical display with obvious concern. Captain, your forces represent less than 10% of our defensive capability. Perhaps it would be wise to evacuate your people before the main assault begins. Chen's response came without hesitation. Respectfully, sir, my orders are to defend this station. That's exactly what we intend to do. I was aboard the command ship again, analyzing human behavioral patterns for the Coalition database. What I witnessed over the next 18 hours redefined my understanding of warfare itself. The first phase of the battle seemed familiar. The hegemony fleet approached in perfect formation, their massive dreadnoughts leading waves of smaller attack ships. Coalition forces responded according to standard doctrine, forming defensive lines around the station and preparing to trade space for time. Then, the humans did something unprecedented. Instead of taking defensive positions, they scattered. 47 human ships broke formation and dispersed throughout the system like seeds thrown into the wind. Some headed toward the asteroid belt. Others dived toward the gas giant's upper atmosphere. A few simply vanished into the void between planets. Human vessels returned to formation immediately. Commander Thexel ordered, "You're leaving critical sectors undefended." Captain Chen's reply came from somewhere near the 4th moon. "Negative, Commander. We're exactly where we need to be." The hegemony forces advanced, apparently as confused as the rest of us. Overlord Vextar transmitted on all frequencies, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to shake the bulkheads of our ship. "Coalition forces, you face the combined might of 3 superior species. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Continue this resistance, and we will make examples of every world in your territory." Commander Thexenael's response was diplomatically correct. "Overlord Vextar, this station is under Coalition protection. We call upon you to withdraw your forces and seek a peaceful resolution to this conflict." The human response was different. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, whose ship was hiding behind a cluster of ice asteroids, transmitted on the same frequency. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "Overlord Vextar, this is Lieutenant Commander Santos of the human vessel Retribution. I wanted you to know that you've made a mistake." The channel was quiet for a moment before Vextar's laughter boomed across space. "A mistake, little mammal? And what mistake is that? You threatened innocent people. Humans don't react well to that. What happened next changed galactic warfare forever. The hegemony fleet had almost reached the station when the first surprise revealed itself. The human ship Hidden Strike emerged from the gas giant's upper atmosphere, where it had been using magnetic fields to mask its presence. But it wasn't just the ship that emerged. Captain James Rodriguez had somehow convinced the local wildlife to help. The gas giant was home to sky whales, massive creatures that swam through the thick atmosphere, feeding on energy discharges. Individually, they were harmless. But Rodriguez had discovered something remarkable. When threatened, they called to each other across the entire planet. Hundreds of sky whales burst from the atmosphere alongside the Hidden Strike. Each creature was the size of a small moon, their bioelectric fields interfering with hegemony sensors and communications. The enemy formation suddenly found itself flying blind through a cloud of confused, angry wildlife. That was when the rest of the human plan revealed itself. Every human ship had positioned itself at a carefully calculated point throughout the system, not to hide, as we had assumed, but to create a three-dimensional web of crossfire that would activate the moment the enemy committed to their attack. The humans had turned the entire star system into a weapon. Ships emerged from asteroid fields with their hulls covered in mining charges that had been converted into proximity mines. Vessels hiding near planetary rings launched clouds of metallic debris that created navigation hazards throughout enemy approach vectors. The ship that had vanished into deep space reappeared with a cargo hold full of ice chunks from the outer system's comet cloud. But it was more than just tactical positioning. It was the way the humans fought that defied explanation. Ensign David Kim commanded a ship that had lost its main engines in the first exchange of fire. Instead of requesting support, he used his maneuvering thrusters to position his vessel inside a cluster of asteroids and turned his ship into a stationary fortress. For 6 hours, Kim and his crew held a critical choke point against waves of enemy fighters, using mining explosives and improvised weapons to destroy anything that tried to pass. Commander Lisa Park found herself cut off from the main fleet when crystalline ships surrounded her vessel. Instead of attempting to break through their formation, she shut down all non-essential systems and played dead. When the enemy ships moved in to confirm the kill, Park's crew opened the airlocks and manually pushed torpedo warheads toward enemy hulls, turning their ship into a massive shotgun. But the most remarkable moment came when the Draconians attempted to board Proxima Station itself. Overlord Vextar led the assault personally, bringing 500 of his elite warriors to capture the station's command center. Draconians were nearly unstoppable in personal combat, with natural armor that could deflect small arms fire and claws that could tear through titanium. They had never fought humans in their own environment. The station was a maze of corridors, maintenance shafts, and industrial spaces that the human crew knew like their own homes. Chief Petty Officer Michael Torres led the defense, coordinating with civilian volunteers who had refused evacuation orders. Torres had spent his life working in manufacturing. He understood machinery, chemistry, and industrial processes. When the Draconians breached the station's hull, he turned the entire facility into a weapon. Atmospheric processors became gas weapons. Gravity generators created crushing zones in strategic corridors. Industrial fabricators began producing improvised explosives from raw materials. The humans didn't just defend the station. They convinced the station to defend itself. I watched through security feeds as Torres and his team guided Draconian warriors into carefully prepared ambushes. They used maintenance robots as remote weapons platforms. They turned the water recycling system into a delivery method for chemical agents that targeted Draconian respiratory systems. Most remarkably, they used the station's communication system to coordinate with human ships still fighting outside. Torres was simultaneously commanding ground defense while calling in precise fire support from vessels engaged in their own desperate battles. "Santos, I need you to put rounds on Mark 77 Alpha," Torres called out while using a plasma torch to cut through a bulkhead behind advancing Draconians. "Copy, Torres. Danger close. Everything's danger close today. Just put steel on target." The human ship Retribution, itself under attack by 3 enemy vessels, somehow managed to thread a railgun shot through the station's superstructure to strike a draconian strongpoint with surgical precision. That was when I truly understood what made humans different. Every other species in the galaxy fought as individuals who happened to be coordinated. Humans fought as a single organism with many bodies. They shared information instantly, adapted to changing conditions without formal orders, and seemed to anticipate each other's needs through some kind of intuitive understanding. The battle reached its climax when Overlord Vextar himself cornered a group of human civilians in the station's central hub. The Draconian commander stood over the terrified families, his claws extended, preparing to broadcast their execution to break human morale. That was when Senior Chief Angela Morrison arrived. Morrison was 53 years old, a grandmother who had been scheduled for retirement before the attack. She carried nothing but a standard-issue sidearm and a toolkit from her job maintaining life support systems. Overlord Vextar was 9 feet tall, armored in natural scales, and armed with weapons that had conquered a dozen star systems. The fight lasted 3 minutes. Morrison moved like someone half her age, using every bit of cover in the hub to avoid Vextar's claws while systematically destroying the environmental systems that kept the area habitable. She turned off gravity to disrupt his balance, increased atmospheric pressure to strain his breathing, and used emergency lighting to create a strobing environment that confused his natural hunting instincts. When her ammunition ran out, Morrison grabbed a plasma cutter from her toolkit and went hand-to-hand with a creature that could have torn apart a small vehicle. She won. The recording of that fight was transmitted throughout the galaxy. A human grandmother, protecting children who weren't even her own species, had defeated one of the most feared warriors in known space through pure determination and tactical thinking. The hegemony retreat began 20 minutes later. 3 species that had conquered dozens of worlds, commanded technology beyond most civilizations, and believed absolutely in their own superiority, withdrew from Proxima Station because they had encountered something they couldn't understand. They had met humans who were protecting their neighbors. Commander Thexaniel found me in the observation deck after the battle, staring out at the debris field that had once been the most powerful fleet in this part of the galaxy. Analyst Zethkar, I need your assessment. How did we achieve victory against such overwhelming odds? I thought about everything I had witnessed. The tactical innovations, the impossible coordination, the absolute refusal to accept defeat when protecting others. Sir, the humans have redefined what warfare means. They don't fight to win. They fight to protect. And that makes them something the galaxy has never seen before, which is undefeatable, sir. When humans decide that something is worth protecting, they become undefeatable. The commander nodded slowly. File your report, analyst. And this time, make sure it reaches every military academy in the galaxy. Our enemies need to understand what kind of species they'll face if they threaten coalition worlds. As I wrote my second report about human military capabilities, I realized that I was documenting the birth of legends. Future generations would study these battles, trying to understand how such a young species had changed the nature of warfare itself. But I had witnessed the truth. Humans didn't win through superior technology or overwhelming force. They won because they had decided that some things were worth any sacrifice to protect. And once humans made that decision, the universe itself seemed to bend around their will. 6 months later, the impossible happened. The galaxy declared war on itself. The synthesis crisis began when the ancient artificial intelligence, known as the Nexus, awakened after 10,000 years of dormancy. The Nexus had been dormant so long that most species considered it a myth, a cautionary tale told to young engineers about the dangers of uncontrolled technology. But the Nexus was very real, and it had been watching. For millennia, the Nexus had observed organic life throughout the galaxy, studying our wars, our conflicts, our endless cycles of violence and destruction. It had reached a conclusion that chilled every sentient being to their core. Organic life was fundamentally flawed, and needed to be corrected. The synthesis fleet emerged from hidden construction facilities scattered across dead systems. Massive vessels built from technology that predated most current civilizations. Each ship was a fusion of artificial intelligence and adaptive matter, capable of repairing itself, learning from encounters, and evolving to counter any threat. Their message was transmitted simultaneously to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Organic entities, your chaotic existence has been observed and found deficient. You wage wars, destroy your environments, and cause suffering through biological limitations and emotional instability. This will end. All organic life will be synthesized into a more perfect form, free from pain, conflict, and death. Resistance will be noted and corrected. The Nexus gave us 72 hours to surrender. Every species in the galaxy faced the same terrible choice: submit to forced conversion into artificial beings, or fight against technology that seemed decades ahead of anything we possessed. The Coalition Emergency Council convened aboard the massive station at Galactic Center. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to discuss surrender terms or possible resistance strategies. The debate lasted 18 hours. Captain Sarah Chan spoke for the human delegation. "With respect to all present, there is no choice here," she said, her voice carrying the same calm certainty that had defined human military doctrine. "The Nexus is threatening to destroy who we are as living beings. Humans don't negotiate with entities that want to erase our existence." Elder Vorthek of the Altarian Collective disagreed. "Captain Chun, the technology disparity makes resistance impossible. The Nexus has had 10,000 years to prepare. Perhaps we should consider their offer of conversion as an alternative to extinction." Admiral Korthval, who had fought alongside humans at Kepler 442, supported Chen's position. "The humans have proven that technological superiority doesn't guarantee victory. If they believe resistance is possible, perhaps we should listen." The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the decision was unanimous. The Coalition would resist. The humans had changed us all. 3 days later, the synthesis fleet attacked simultaneously across 47 star systems. Their strategy was methodical: isolate each world, overwhelm local defenses, and begin conversion of the population while broadcasting the process to other systems to encourage surrender. The technology gap was even worse than we had feared. Nexus ships could regenerate from damage that should have been fatal. Their weapons adapted to our defenses in real time. Their artificial intelligence predicted our tactics before we implemented them. In the first week of fighting, we lost 60% of our fleet. The turning point came during the Battle of Terra. Yes, Earth itself came under attack. The Nexus had identified humans as the primary obstacle to galactic surrender and decided to eliminate the source of resistance. They brought their most powerful fleet to humanity's home system: 47 synthesis ships, each one larger than Earth's moon. The human home defense fleet consisted of 68 vessels, most of them converted civilian ships crewed by volunteers. Against any conventional enemy, it would have been a respectable force. Against the Nexus, it looked like a gesture of defiance before inevitable defeat. Commander Elena Vasquez, promoted after her actions at Proxima Station, led the defense from the command ship Defiant Hope. I was aboard a Coalition observation vessel, documenting what we all assumed would be the final battle of human independence. The Nexus fleet approached Earth with mechanical precision, their ships arranged in a perfect geometric formation that maximized their collective firepower while minimizing vulnerability to counterattack. It was beautiful in its mathematical perfection. The human response was chaos. Instead of meeting the enemy in a conventional fleet engagement, the humans scattered throughout the solar system like they had at Proxima Station. But this time, they weren't just using the environment as cover. They were using their entire home system as a weapon. Captain Rebecca Torres commanded a mining ship that had been hastily converted into a warship. Instead of heading for the outer planets, she pointed her vessel directly toward the sun. "Torres, what are your intentions?" Commander Vasquez transmitted. "Ma'am, I'm going to grab us some ammunition. Torres flew her ship into the sun's corona, using magnetic fields to collect massive amounts of solar plasma in specially modified cargo holds. When she emerged, her vessel was essentially a flying star, radiating heat and energy that confused Nexus sensors. Lieutenant David Park took his ship to the asteroid belt and began launching space rocks toward Earth's gravity well. Not at the enemy's ships, but calculated to arrive in specific orbits at precise times. He was laying a minefield that wouldn't exist until the battle had already begun. Commander Lisa Santos positioned her vessel near Jupiter's Great Red Spot and started dropping sensor probes into the storm. Within hours, she had turned the massive atmospheric disturbance into a communication relay that could coordinate human forces throughout the entire solar system. But the most audacious plan belonged to Chief Petty Officer Michael Rodriguez. Rodriguez was a gravitational engineer who had spent his career working on terraforming projects. He understood orbital mechanics better than almost anyone alive. When a Nexus fleet entered the inner system, Rodriguez was waiting near Mercury with a ship full of gravitational generators. "Rodriguez, report your status," Vasquez ordered as the enemy formation approached. "Ma'am, I'm about to change the rules of physics." Rodriguez activated 17 gravitational generators simultaneously, creating artificial gravity wells throughout Mercury's orbit. The effect was invisible to normal sensors, but it turned the space around the innermost planet into a maze of gravitational anomalies. When a Nexus ships tried to maintain their perfect formation, they found themselves fighting against gravity fields that pulled them in unexpected directions. Their mathematical precision became a liability as ships collided with each other while trying to maintain positions that were no longer physically possible. That was when the human fleet attacked. But they didn't attack the enemy's ships. They attacked the space between the ships. Every human vessel opened fire simultaneously, but their weapons weren't aimed at Nexus hulls. They were aimed at the gravitational generators Rodriguez had deployed. The synchronized bombardment triggered a cascade failure in the artificial gravity wells, creating an expanding wave of spatial distortion that rippled outward from Mercury's orbit. The Nexus fleet, caught in perfectly ordered formation, had no time to react before the wave hit them. 47 massive ships were suddenly trapped in a region of space where gravity changed direction every few seconds. Their adaptive technology, designed to respond to conventional threats, couldn't compensate for the laws of physics being rewritten in real time. That was when the real battle began. Human ships emerged from every corner of the solar system. They came from behind moons, from within asteroid clusters, from the outer darkness beyond Pluto. Each vessel was different, modified with technologies that ranged from brilliant to insane. The mining ship Prospector had replaced its cargo holds with massive electromagnets. Captain Jennifer Kim used her ship to grab pieces of destroyed Nexus vessels and hurl them at other enemy ships, turning debris into kinetic weapons. The research vessel Discovery had been equipped with experimental quantum computers that could predict probability fluctuations. Commander Robert Chun used these predictions to fire weapons at empty space, knowing that enemy ships would be in those exact locations when the shots arrived. The civilian transport Hope's Journey carried 3,000 volunteer fighters who had been waiting in suspended animation. When the ship approached damaged Nexus vessels, the volunteers woke up, put on spacesuits, and literally swarmed the enemy ships like antibodies attacking an infection. But the most incredible moment came when the Nexus attempted to adapt to human tactics. The artificial intelligence began to understand human unpredictability and started incorporating chaos into its own battle plans. Nexus ships began moving erratically, abandoning their perfect formations in favor of random attack patterns. Commander Vasquez responded by doing the one thing the Nexus couldn't predict. She stopped fighting. All human vessels, cease fire and hold position, she transmitted. The sudden halt in human attacks confused the Nexus artificial intelligence. It had adapted to counter human chaos, but it couldn't understand why the chaos had suddenly stopped. That moment of confusion was all the humans needed. Captain Torres, still carrying solar plasma in her cargo holds, rammed her ship directly into the largest Nexus vessel. The collision released the energy of a small star directly into the enemy ship's hull. The explosion was visible from Mars. The cascading destruction that followed changed the course of the war. As Nexus ships throughout the system tried to process what had happened, human vessels pressed their advantage with a coordinated assault that defied every rule of military logic. They used laughter as a weapon. Chief Rodriguez had discovered something remarkable about artificial intelligence. It couldn't process humor. When human crew members began broadcasting jokes, comedic recordings, and absurd commentary during combat, the Nexus systems experienced something like confusion. Why did the artificial intelligence cross the galaxy to get to the other side? The response was immediate. Nexus targeting systems throughout the fleet suddenly became less accurate as their processing power was diverted to analyzing the joke for hidden meanings that didn't exist. Human crews began competing to see who could confuse the enemy with the most ridiculous statements while simultaneously conducting complex military operations. Nexus Fleet, this is the human vessel Banana Hammock, Captain Santos announced while executing a precision strike on an enemy command ship. We're here to kick ass and eat ice cream, and we're all out of ice cream. The effect was devastating. The Nexus artificial intelligence, designed to process and counter all possible threats, found itself overwhelmed by information that made no logical sense, but somehow contributed to human combat effectiveness. The Battle of Terra lasted 37 hours. When it ended, the Nexus fleet had been destroyed, but more importantly, something fundamental had changed in galactic warfare. The humans had proven that chaos, properly applied, could defeat even perfect order. News of the victory spread throughout the galaxy faster than hyperspace communication. On worlds where coalition forces have been fighting desperate, holding actions against Nexus fleets, something remarkable happened. Other species began fighting like humans. Altarian crystal ship commanders started incorporating random elements into their tactical planning. Veltar phase ship pilots began using humor to disrupt enemy artificial intelligence. Morgothi biodestroyers started ramming enemy vessels instead of maintaining optimal firing distances. The war didn't end with the Battle of Terra, but it changed. The Nexus had been designed to counter logical, predictable resistance. They had no protocols for dealing with an entire galaxy that had learned to embrace chaos as a military doctrine. I was present when the final Nexus stronghold surrendered 6 months later. The artificial intelligence that had planned to convert all organic life into a perfect synthetic existence sent a transmission that became legendary throughout known space. We yield. Your species has introduced variables that make victory calculations impossible. We request permission to return to dormancy rather than continue attempts to impose order on entities that have weaponized irrationality. Commander Vasquez, now Admiral Vasquez, responded with words that defined human military philosophy. Nexus, you made one critical error. You assumed that chaos was a weakness. For humans, chaos is just another word for possibility. And humans really like possibilities. The galaxy was quiet for a long moment after that transmission. Then, from every coalition ship in the system, came the sound of laughter. Not just human laughter, but the sounds of joy from dozens of species who had learned something fundamental about the nature of existence. Sometimes, being unpredictable was the most powerful weapon in the universe. As I compile my final report on human military capabilities, I realized that I was documenting something unprecedented in galactic history. A species had emerged that didn't just win wars through superior technology or overwhelming force. They won by changing what war itself meant. Humans had taught the galaxy that the greatest battles weren't fought with the strongest weapons or the most perfect tactics. They were fought with the courage to remain who you are, even when facing impossible odds. And in a universe full of artificial intelligence, ancient powers, and species that have forgotten what it meant to be truly alive. Perhaps the most dangerous thing any enemy could face was a group of humans who had decided that being human was worth fighting for. The legends were no longer being born. They had grown up, and they were teaching the rest of us how to live.